So welcome to Cut Through the Noise. How can you build, communicate, and protect your brain in a hybrid world? And it's good to see so many could make it live, because it goes to show how important this topic is today, tomorrow, and in the world to come. And we are also very aware of everyone's time poorness, and time is the most important and valuable assets, which is why we want to make sure you get the bang for your buck. And you don't only have one speaker, but you've got 3 speakers. So over the next 45 minutes or so, we are actually covering 3 parts to how to cut through the noise. I kick off with what it takes for you to build your authority brain and why it is so important. And Mel takes over to talk about cutting through communication by building meaningful connections. And JF is rounding up the masterclass, and he talks through how we can protect our most valuable digital assets and how can we even establish our digital ecosystem the right way. So hopefully you are strapped in, because there is lots to come. And this is probably the reason, or one of many reasons, that you're here. It is noisy, it is crowded, it's loud in the marketplace. And even just in the last 12 months, since the world has gone online, on LinkedIn, we've seen a 50% increase in content creation. And truth, we are in a digital first world, and it's not going anywhere. And just to iterate some of those interesting facts here, we every single day generate 1.145 trillion megabyte of data, which is a lot. 3.5 billion Google searches are conducted every single day. 4.4 billion active social media users. And majority of users also use social media to make up their mind whether they purchase something. And that also goes in terms of skill sets. My background is recruitment, and I placed over 300 candidates in roles, and I only placed a handful of job advertisements online. The rest was literally through search. So this is how powerful social media is all about. And this is another big factor that we need to consider. We make up our minds so quickly whether we think this is the right person for us, whether they are the trusted authority in their space, or if there's somebody better. So the question is, what do people see when they come onto your profile? Are you happy with it? Are you not happy with it? Because truth told, in this day and age, it's not so much only the absence of the bad. You know, everyone was so worried about having negative comments or getting negative feedback on a post. But these days, it's also the absence of the good. When we can't find you online, we're a bit worried. So what does this person have to hide? What's wrong with them? This is how we think already, because usually the first point of contact that we have with people is online. Now, I quickly want to see if I can launch. No, I can't. Hang on. I quickly want to run a little poll, and I want to know, how happy and comfortable are you with your current digital presence? We've got 4 options. They are totally anonymous. I just want to see where everyone's online footprint sits at the moment. Are you saying top notch, I'm owning my name and rocking it, saying, oh, it's okay, but yeah, not the best? Is it a bit outdated? Can we see a photo of you in your teens? Or maybe it's like, I'm not online, you can't find me there. So a quick look, we say it's okay, not amazing, but acceptable, a bit outdated, top notch, owning the name. It's a good balance. So I give you another 5 seconds. Get your votes in, that we know where we are sitting. And there we go. It's okay. Not great, but acceptable. It is a good start. And this is also why we're here. What can we do to get better? Because, like it or not, Mel said it so correctly, it's not the new normal, it's the next normal. We're not going backwards anymore. We live in this hybrid world. And usually the first point of contact that we have with people is online. We are expecting to chat with the customer service team on our terms at a time that suits us, not when customer service times are open. So high expectations we see all around. But that goes both ways. Talents are looking up their future leaders as they've got a presence or not, what they're talking about, what kind of conversations they lead. And even 80% of staff say one of the reasons why they stay with an organization is their leaders' online presence and their brand, because they want to be part of something bigger than that. But it also goes the other way. As I said, I placed over 300 candidates in roles. And the first thing that we as a recruiter do, I mean, I'm not in recruitment active anymore, but this is what every decision maker does. They are checking you out online. If you are not distinct in terms of your area of expertise, your personality, your background, there are another gazillion choices out there. And this is what we need to consider, why it is so important to build a strong footprint, because we live in a more complex, more connected, and also more competitive world of work. And whatever we are doing, highly likely somebody else can do it cheaper somewhere else. And this is why we always say the old rules of career success, they don't apply anymore. You're not within you're not applying with an organization that's close to commuting distance, that you climb up the ladder and then retire. It doesn't happen anymore. We have to build a much bigger footprint. And I'm not sure if anyone has heard of Rachel Botsman, but she is a researcher, a fellow at Oxford, researching trust. And she coined the term reputational capital. And the definition of reputational capital is the sum value of our online and offline behaviors across communities and marketplaces. It's not just so much what our industry or our company or our state says about us, it's what the world says about us. How much social proof have we got? What kind of associations are we part of? What kind of recommendations do we see on LinkedIn? These are all components of us making up our mind whether this person is trustworthy, if they're better than the rest. And like it or not, as I said, the first point of contact is usually when we look people up online. So your reputation doesn't follow you. It's there before we get there. And I always love this part of a workshop that I'm running. Check out anyone's profile that you can find on this little screen. Grab a name and see what comes up. Maybe you're surprised that they have a sheep farm in New South Wales, but they are a general manager of an IT company. Who knows? Because what happens on social media, guess what? Stays on Google forever. So we want to make sure we foster our own reputation management. And this is exactly what we need to consider. It's not just what our immediate circle says about us. It's how our colleagues, our previous clients, our previous managers would introduce us, would talk about us. What do we see when we Google your name? And when we take it a step further, what do we see when we Google your name and go on to images? Do we see the photos that are associated with you as your name? Do you own your name? Or is it associated with somebody else? Same with LinkedIn. How up to date is your LinkedIn profile? Do we see the right skills associated with what you want to be known for? This is already what builds our reputation. And what we do now is that just being better, being more experienced, being more educated isn't good enough anymore. Because knowledge and degrees, unfortunately, have become a commodity. The only way how we can actually stand out is by being distinct, is by going from being the expert to becoming the authority. Just doing the doing without others actually knowing about us doesn't get us anywhere. To become the trusted authority, we need to obviously have high competence, but also high visibility. Because, like it or not, if we can't be found, we can't be considered. And who doesn't want to be considered for board role opportunities, for more senior roles, for example, for speaking engagements? And just this year, I landed 3 big clients, not by me reaching out to them, but by them finding me on LinkedIn. And Microsoft Austria, they literally said, we Googled personal branding in Austria, saying that I haven't been in Austria for 11 years next month, but he said, you were the only person that came up. So this is the power of you setting up your online profile and presence the right way. And obviously they did some research on me if I would be legit. Also, so I have my website, I've got some recommendations there. Looks like I know what I'm talking about. And this is what we make up our mind on. So the question is, how do we get started? We know we have to be good at what we're doing, obviously, but we also need to be visible. So it all starts with us building our trusted brand, which I'll talk through how to actually do it in the next slide. So bear with me. So it all starts with us, because if we can't articulate what we can do, what our strength is, what makes us distinct, how can anyone else do that? So with this clarity also comes confidence, and the confidence for us to put ourselves out there. It comes down to then communicating it to the right way. And this is what Mel will talk through. How can we actually communicate to build meaningful connections online and offline? Once you know that, we can then build the right connections. And it starts obviously within your industry, within your profession, within your company, but we want to expand it further. The world has become a tiny little space. So we want to be connected with the right people. And then it's not just about collecting more people into our network. We also need to foster those relationships. And that means we need to give value over and over, share content over and over, share relevant articles, make relevant introductions with each other. This is how we can stay top of mind, and with that being the trusted authority in that space. And this, if you want to take a screenshot, is the magical triangle as to what it takes for you to become the trusted authority brand. It has those three components. The easiest one that we can measure very easily is the credibility part. And this is where most people over-index. They go into getting another MBA, they do another degree, they spend another 2 years in the role to get more experience, to then get to the more senior role. But it's only one piece to the puzzle. Because if I can't connect with you, if I don't necessarily like you, if I can't see behind the curtains and see how you do what you do, what kind of associations are you part of, who are your mentors, who is your team, there is a little bit of a trust issue. And of course, the third part is the communication. I can only be recognized for my thought leadership, for my ideas, for my insights when I'm sharing it. Nobody's chasing us to say, hey, do you want to talk about XY topic? No, no one does it. So we need to be proactive. And it starts with contributing content, say on LinkedIn, through a short form post. It could be a newsletter. It could be a long form article. It could be webinars like that. There are so many ways how we can actually create content. It's also about engaging in other people's content, that we are visible to those people. It's about sharing your journey as you go. What are you learning? What are you experimenting? Because this is how we see that you are a person, that you are likable, and we can see ourselves also in your journey. This is what people are really interested in. So not just the credibility part, what makes you trustworthy to talk about this area of expertise, but also how do you do it? What is your story? How did you get into what you're doing, and who you are associated with? So the social proof part. So credibility, once more, connections, communications. So where from here? There are a couple of little exercises and steps that you can take right away, because we're all about taking actions. You want to start with the first piece, and this is clarity. What is it that you want to be known for? If I had to introduce you to a decision maker who could actually open doors for you, what would you want me to say about you? And this is also, given we are working from home more often, we live in those micro moments. What can I quickly pick up from you and say, you know what, XYZ is the go-to for, you name it. And then you also want to see, where am I right now? Am I already known for that, or are there some gaps that I need to fill? So ask, 5 trusted people. It could be your colleagues, it could be friends, it could be family, it could be your partner. What are those 3 or 5 words that you would associate with me, and why? And lastly, what are 3 actions that you can take straight away to amplify the position that you already have, or to bridge a gap where you want to be? When you say, oh, this person is quite flustered and a little bit disorganized, how can we become more organized? Or when we say it's very tactical, how can we change that to be more strategic? What are those actions? Even simply enrolling into a course, reading a book, connecting with a more senior thought leader in that space. These are all small actions that make all the difference already when it comes to you becoming visible for the right reasons and becoming the trustworthy authority. And this is the wrap up of the first part. If anyone wants to take it a little bit further, grab your phone. By now we should know how to scan a barcode. There is a direct link to a free guide. It's called From Expert to Authority in Your Industry. And you can download it with a few more questions, a few more, a worksheet basically, and 5 steps how you can transition from expert to authority. with that said, we are available for some questions at the end of the session, but I'll hand over to Mel because, as I promised before, we want to give you as much valuable content in this session as we possibly can. Mel, over to you.
Thanks so much, Petra, and welcome again, everyone. I Googled myself while you were talking, and while I know that I own the first 5 or 6 pages of Google with my name, I hadn't looked at the images for a while, and there were a couple that had me giggling my head off. So if you were looking at me and wondering why I was laughing, that's why. It's such a fun exercise to do. The other thing that you mentioned about becoming a trusted authority and asking 5 people what they think of you or what words they associate with you, I did that a few years ago on Facebook, and some of the responses were really interesting. Most of them weren't surprising, but it was a really lovely question to ask to see what people thought when I said, what are the couple of words that come to mind when you hear my name? Anyway, I'm talking today about communication, and I thought I'd take a slightly different tack to talk about how can we and how are we and how do we need to communicate differently as we continue moving through COVID. Communicating through COVID is definitely a massive challenge for many of us, and you just need to turn on the TV or look at social media to see the full spectrum of good, bad and ugly. Every day on Twitter I see the ugly and I just mute and block and delete lots of people every day. As we go through this session, I want you to think of Maya Angelou's famous quote. Try and hold that straight. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So just bear that in the back of your mind as we continue through my portion of this. We also need to remember that we're all dealing with change and uncertainty, and how we deal with this will impact on our businesses in the future, because people remember how you treated them and how you continue to treat them throughout this COVID time. And more than ever, organisations right now today, have a responsibility to the people that they work with and that work for them. We need to understand the relationship between home, between work, and between the social network that people have. And it's really important that we understand the links between the complexity of working from home and what different people's individual complex experiences might be. Do they have a dedicated workspace? Do they have an office? Or do they share the dining table with their partner and their kids? Do they have to help with home learning for their children? What's the individual circumstance of each of your staff who are working from home? And then think through also, what are their job requirements? Are they simple? Are they stressful? Are they enormous? Have you simplified them during COVID? What are the outcomes you're expecting people to achieve? What's the volume of work that's required? And what's the level of increased difficulty if they are working from home or working remotely part or all of the time? And then third thing that we need to think about is, what's the quality of the support network that people have? Do they have a network professionally? What support are you as an organisation providing to them? Do they have a support network personally? Do they live alone? Do they live with people who love them? And what's their social network like? How are they supported by family and friends? And what might they need from you as an employer or a colleague or an organisation? COVID has thrown up an enormous number of challenges. So I'd love you just to type in the chat box, what are some of the challenges that you have or that you're seeing around you? Some of the challenges that I personally have had are feelings of confusion and feelings of what next. And waking up this morning and hearing the news that there's another couple of COVID cases in Brisbane and that we might be going back into a lockdown. What's that? Feelings of overwhelm. And I'm seeing are people who are disengaged, and some people are a lot less productive and some people are a lot more productive, but we're all wondering what's next. I'm seeing so many businesses struggling. I live on the Sunshine Coast, and the number of businesses that are impacted because of the lack of tourists up here, I think that tourism this school holidays is 40% less than usual. So that's hurting an enormous number of people. Some of your comments, connecting with people without meeting face to face, that is really hard. Sadness, can't see family or do what used to be normal. Yeah, it's really difficult right now. And so we need to be really conscious of what people are thinking and feeling, particularly when they're feeling overwhelmed and you want to keep them motivated. And as Gretel said, when they've got customer-facing roles, that motivation is even more important. My husband works for Coles, and every single week he gets an email from the operations manager saying, "This is what we're doing. Thank you for the work that you're doing." And the value that he and his colleagues, who are all customer facing roles, the value that they feel as an employee is incredible. He's worked in a lot of large organisations and doing a whole range of different jobs, from what he's doing now through to being a CFO of a large organisation. And this is the most valued he's ever felt. And who would have thought that? So we need to also remember that for those of us in office-based jobs, working from home and virtual workplaces are here to stay. 90% of Australians, according to PricewaterhouseCoopers, want to continue working from home in some capacity, and that impacts how we work and how we communicate. And it impacts all areas of our business. It impacts productivity, it impacts culture, it impacts employee engagement, collaboration, innovation, and of course, it impacts the bottom line. So we need to think about how we're communicating so we get it right. Because when we get it wrong, there can be really big consequences. And when we get it right, we can energize people, which energizes our customers and our clients and our organizations. So I have a little diagram here that I just would like to share with you. There's 4 ways that we can communicate, or that our communication style can come across. And we've got 2 axes. We've got this vertical one. At the bottom, we've got ego, which I'll just write a little bit higher up. Are we communicating with ego, or are we communicating with heart? And what that means is, are we making our communication all about us down here, or are we making it more about the people who we're communicating with up here? And then the second axis is our strategy. How strategic are we? Are we reactive and reacting to everything, or are we proactive? And yes, it's really challenging at the moment to constantly be proactive because there's a lot of things that we need to react to, but we've been dealing with COVID for 1.5 years now. So if you're in Brisbane and you're thinking maybe there's going to be another lockdown in the next week or so, what are some things you can be proactively thinking so that it's not, so that you're prepared if it happens? So we've got 4 different styles. If you communicate largely with ego and reactive, you often come across as being a bit clueless. And when you're clueless, you always need to be right. We all know people like this. You always need to be right. You don't like to be told what to do. You're not very good at listening, and you operate out of self-interest. The second style is chaotic. Chaotic communicators often speak before thinking. They're so passionate about their people and about what's right and about doing the right thing that they often react to what's happening and forget that they need to sometimes be a bit proactive and strategic with what they say and what they do. And because of this chaoticness, the communication can often seem really inconsistent, both in terms of the message that they have and the way they deliver it. The third box down here is, oops, can I bring the white box closer? Ooh, hope that's a bit better. The third down here is confident. You might be wondering, why is confident not up here? Well, confident is down here because sometimes when you communicate with in a strategic, proactive way, but with ego, you can sometimes come across as being a little bit of a know-it-all or a little bit deceptive. You can be overly focused on purpose at the extent or at the expense of the people. And staff can often feel really insignificant and undervalued in this section when you're overly confident. And then the fourth one is convincing. When you come across as a convincing communicator or somebody who communicates with conviction, that's when you earn loyalty and trust. Communicating with conviction is the cornerstone of trust. Your communication has a purpose and it feels meaningful. People feel valued and you leave a lasting impact. And what I love about people who are speaking with conviction is that they're unafraid to be authentic. So I've just got a quick poll question, which I will just pop up and open the next one. Hopefully that's up. So there's two questions. What is your communication style? And again, it's anonymous. And then what is your organisation's communication style? Do you think, which of these categories are you? Clueless, chaotic, confident, or convincing? And the same with your organisation. All right, lots of confidence, a couple of convincings and some chaotics. Yeah, a few chaotic yep, okay, great. I'm really pleased to see no clueless. The last time I asked this question, I had about 25% said that their organisation was clueless, and that was quite concerning to me. So thank you. I think that we'll just close that off now. Thank you very much. So the next question, and I'll just share those results with you. So the majority of people were either confident or chaotic, and in terms of your organisation, a lot of you feel confident. Oh, that's fantastic. Okay. And I say that's fantastic because it's great that you're being strategic as an organisation. I'll stop sharing that now. So I've just got a few minutes left, and I know that you're curious to know, what is it that you need to do to become convincing? There's 5 things. You need to lead yourself first. You need to look after your energy. You need to understand what gives you energy and what saps your energy. I've just had a 10-day staycation where I did a lot of lounging on the daybed and lots of lunchtime beers and painting a few walls and lots of life admin stuff. But I feel so rejuvenated and refreshed and so filled with energy. Now, I'm not suggesting that you all go and take a 10-day staycation, but think about what is it that you can do to re-energize yourself. The second thing you need to do is you might need to shift your mindset. Carol Dweck talks about a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. And we also need to be thinking about what's our communication mindset, because everything we say and do communicates something to somebody, which leads to relationship building and trust. The third thing we need to do is we need to know our purpose and we need to have a plan. And this is really critical because research that's come out from McKinsey in the last week or two has said that nearly 2/3 of American-based employees are reflecting on their purpose in life because of COVID, and almost half of them said they're reconsidering the type of work they do as a consequence of that. I do not think the numbers in Australia are any different to that. We might have a slight lag, but every single person I speak to at the moment is reconsidering what their life will look like once we come out of this COVID thing. The other thing, as Petra talked about, is it's really important to communicate your organisational purpose so that you can attract the right people. What is it you're saying? What is it you're doing? Fourth, we need to understand our people. We need to understand our staff, our suppliers, our customers. And I think the number one thing that we need to recognise is that loneliness at work and in society is rampant. This is not due to COVID. Loneliness was increasingly becoming an epidemic before COVID and lockdown, and work from home and people who live alone and work alone has been exacerbated enormously. 1 in 2 Australians say they're lonely at least once a week, and 1 in 10 have no social support. So it's really, really important that you understand your people. And as I mentioned before, ask questions, find out what they need from you. One of the questions I love is asking people, what do you need from me? What can I do to make your job easier? So think about how can you be asking those questions. And then finally, we need to communicate to connect. We need to communicate with clarity, with compassion, with consistency. Anything that you communicate, whether it's written or spoken or visual or in some other way, do people understand what you want them to do? How do you want people to feel from when they engage with your piece of communication? And we need to remember that communication is a two-way thing. Don't rely on email. Email is for information, not communication. So talk to people, have conversations with them, find out what's on their mind. Someone said to me the other day, what's in your worry box? And I thought, what a great question. Ask people what's in your worry box. My time's out. Thank you. I do have a white paper on this. If you'd like a copy of it, please pop your email into the chat box or message me privately, and I'll pop my email in the chat box when I'm finished, and I'm really happy to send it to you. So it includes more information about this little diagram and a bit more information about some of the things I spoke about today. So I will now hand over to JF, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Over to you, JF.
Great, thanks, Mel. And that was can you hear me okay? Petra, can you give me a thumbs up if my volume is good? Good, okay, wonderful. Thank you, Mel, for that great presentation. And thank you, Petra, as well. I got some really good takeaways there, Petra. The online presence, which obviously is quite relevant to the topic of cybersecurity. And from you, Mel, convincing rather than chaotic. Big challenge for me, as you'll probably be able to tell from my presentation. Cybersecurity, Hopalong Cybersecurity. I've got a presentation, but I would rather speak to you directly and just have the presentation as a bit of a backdrop to kind of spark some thoughts. So I'll jump in right now. Today we're going to talk about cybersecurity. I'll tell you a little bit about Hopalong. Then I'll talk about what cybersecurity or what a digital ecosystem is. What the vulnerabilities are, and it's interesting with the pandemic, we've seen a very big explosion in vulnerability due to working from home. So we'll talk about that. Then I'd like to do a little poll as well, just to break it up a little bit. And then I'll tell you about what you can do to protect your digital ecosystem. And there's quite a comprehensive bucket list, but I'll try and keep it simple, not too technical. The good thing is I am not a technical person. I have a team of technicians to do so. So I will try and keep this very easily approachable. So Hopalong Cybersecurity was born from the perceived need for individuals to have access to advice and the right software. And the reason is that Hopalong Cyber was founded by 3 individuals. So we have 2 people who work in financial planning. So we have John and Richard, who work for MGD Wealth in South Brisbane, and Jimmy, or James Darwin, who was working at the time for IBM. Jimmy had been in cybersecurity for 20 years, and obviously he was getting requests from friends, relatives, about how to secure their ecosystem. So the three gentlemen cycle regularly together, so they're mammals. Through these interactions, they established that there were probably enough individuals out there who needed a service to secure their digital ecosystems. As we're migrating more and more online, especially people who have assets need to have that protection. And we're seeing cybersecurity threats target those individuals. So there was clearly a need. So Hopalong Cybersecurity was born out of that need. And the other thing that drove this need was that the majority of cybersecurity companies tend to target larger businesses. So many of them claim to target small business, SMEs, but the reality is they're not really interested in talking to businesses that are less than 100 employees. And whilst that is still technically a small business, we know that the vast majority of Australian business is turning over less than $3 million a year. And that's less than 100 employees full-time. So we saw a great opportunity there, and we've decided to focus on that part of the business. So we are a small business, so we understand what a small business is like. And specifically, our service is targeted at the small business, professional working from home as well, or the household. So there are three main groups that we cater with: smaller businesses, professionals working from home, and households. So why should we worry about cybersecurity? Well, it's pretty simple. Now, I'm sure you've heard, you've read about it, you've seen it on the news. It's everywhere. Everywhere, everybody's getting hacked. In fact, Petra was compromised a few days ago, and she shared that on LinkedIn. So the key statistics in this page is really 1 every 8 minutes. So there's one breach or one cyber attack every 8 minutes, and $33 billion lost monies self-reported. Now, that's an important statistics because only 30%, so 1 in 3 people actually report a cyber breach. 2/3 of us in the Australian community do not tell anybody about this. So that a lot of that goes unreported. So the problem is actually a lot larger than we can measure. I mean, we can talk about statistics, and there's millions of them out there. You could go to the Australian Cyber Security Centre. They put out an annual report which came out mid-September. Very, very scary findings. They found that it's 13% up, and the pandemic and working from home has absolutely dramatically exploded as far as cyber breaches using vulnerabilities in the working from home environment. So that's for the why we should be worried. Let's talk about what we should be worried about. So I've got a few case studies, but I'm going to tell you stories instead of doing case studies. So the first one here listed is RR Advice Group. Now, they're a financial planning firm. They were hacked a while back. They were told you need to do something about it. They did some, but not enough. So they were hacked again. And basically, they're now being taken to court. So there are real serious consequences as a business to not doing the right thing. And this is only going to get more and more regulated as the government is now putting more pressure on individuals and businesses to secure their own ecosystems. Levitas Capital, fund manager, they got a fake Zoom invitation, they accepted it. That was enough to download the malware that then led to them losing about $7 million. As a result, one of their biggest clients pulled out all their funds, and basically they had to shut their doors. And this is just illustrating the different methods of infiltration. And only last week, one of the people that we've been in contact with, a financial practice, lost $100,000 worth of one of their clients' money and a bit of their money as well through business email compromise, which is when a hacker impersonates an email and then you give the client, in this case, they gave the client instructions to transfer the funds and the money was gone. But perhaps a more relevant story to the audience today would be what I called here the proximity hack. And that's my story. And I wanted to demonstrate how easy it is to actually penetrate or breach a typical home ecosystem. So I knew someone whose son was a computer science student at UQ. And so I asked Ryan to help me out to try and hack my place, my house. So Ryan is not a hacker, so he's a student, so he's not working for anyone. And he thought he'd give it a go. So he came over to my house, so he went to Officeworks, bought a $15 Wi-Fi extension card, downloaded some software on the internet, drove over to my house, parked outside my house in his car, accessed my Wi-Fi network, and my Wi-Fi network was a very standard setup. NBN technician came around, installed it, gave me a password. It was on a pink fridge magnet, 10-digit alphanumerical code, 10-digit long, put it on my fridge, and away I go. So Ryan drove over to my house, parked outside, accessed my Wi-Fi network, and then proceeded to hack my password. It took him less than 1 second to get in. So at that point, Ryan was on my desktop. He could see everything I have on my desktop, my files, my emails, and basically spend the next 30 minutes or so harvesting the data, and then went home. And then from home, he sent me an email impersonating one of my co-directors, John, in this case, and sent me an email from John. So it looked exactly like the real thing, with an attachment saying, hey, JF, we're going to have a meeting on Monday. Please have a look at this document, and we'll discuss it on Monday. So I opened the document, looked at it, nothing special, went through the material, closed it, forgot about it. And on Monday, we talked about different stuff, and I forgot to mention the document. That document, opening the document, was enough to download a piece of malware called a keylogger. Now, the keylogger is a piece of software that actually tracks your keystroke. Because being on my desktop was not enough to access a secure connection, such as a banking, net bank, or a VPN. So putting a keylogger, however, actually enabled Ryan to track the keystrokes and therefore be able to see everything I typed. So when I next tried to log on to NetBank, he was able to see my username and my password. So he was on the phone to me saying, okay, log on to NetBank and I'll show you something. He could see my password, he could see my username, and he kept reading it out to me. And then when we got to the password, I started typing E, and then he's just, okay, hold right there, stop the experiment, go home, forget about it. So we stopped it there, but I demonstrated the point, which was that hacking into someone's home environment is extremely easy unless it is secure. And we know that the majority of people's houses have minimal, if any, protection. So that's for the story. And I feel this story is probably the most powerful one because, as I said, I set out to demonstrate the vulnerabilities. And those vulnerabilities, as you are no doubt aware, can lead to bad consequences. So beyond losing money, because that is one thing, but beyond losing money, it could actually damage your business. It could interrupt your business and potentially destroy it. So we all know that would be a terrible thing. And as Petra is finding out, there's probably some degree of reputational damage. So obviously we want to avoid cyber breaches. So a very brief representation of the digital ecosystem. We talk about, the way we like to look at it is divided in areas. So credentials is your username, your password. Devices is obviously your mobile phone, your laptop, your desktop, and then we've got the network, which is your Wi-Fi, your office ecosystem and your home ecosystem. Now, all these things need to be protected. And there are all sorts of vulnerability. And if I can demonstrate that, in the middle here, you've got a managed office environment, which is typically very secure. But if your household or your professional working from home or your staff working from home, whether or not they're using a VPN or not, is a vulnerability unless they can be protected. So if you can protect that little circle here, then you're okay. But if it's vulnerable, then the threat will attack this way and go right through your VPN and attack your head office environment. So this is very critical. And this is something that everybody in the industry has identified as a big issue that needs to be addressed immediately. So look, I think I'm running a bit over time. I am indeed. So we're going to skip the poll, but I would encourage you to go to our website to actually go through the health check. So if you look on our website under tools, you'll find a health check. Go through the health check either for your household or for your business. At the end of it, you'll have a pretty good idea of whether you're secure or not. And if you're not, my advice is, and everybody's advice is, you need to do something about it. So how to fix it? Use the zero trust approach is one of the ways you can address it. It's aligned with what the Australian Cybersecurity Centre recommends, and also it's aligned with the NIST, or the Essential 8, as they're called. They have a kind of standard in cybersecurity that say if you do these things, you're going to be okay. And zero trust means securing your credentials, not trusting anybody, so always verifying before you actually accept or enable access to some of your devices or your data. So what you need to do in concrete terms, and the list is here, but I'm going to give you 3 things that you should take away. So the main one is credentials, username, password, secure them. So do not reuse the same password for multiple websites. That's a terrible idea. Do not use the prompt that says, do you want to save this website? Whenever you go onto a website, do not use that and do not save that password. Create your own super secure passphrase and secure it using a password manager of some description. There are free versions out there. There are also paid versions. We have plenty that we could recommend to our customers, but definitely use a password manager. And use multi-factor authentication for all your financial transactions. So that's number one, secure your credentials. Number two, harden your devices and your networks. This is a little bit more technical, but there are some basic things that you can Google or watch a YouTube video and do yourself. A little bit more technical, and this is again why a business like Hotline Cyber is around, is because we know how difficult it can be, and we can do it all for you. And number two, secure your devices and networks. So download some software to do that bit, and then educate yourself. Cyber attacks change all the time, become more elaborate, more complex. It's important to stay across these so that when you get a text saying your package has been delivered, please click here, or your package has been unable to be delivered, please click here. You know that it's a phishing SMS or a smishing, and you won't click on that link and download some malware. And finally, cyber insurance. The great thing about cyber insurance is it includes incident response, which means that if something happens to you on a Friday afternoon at 7 p.m. when you're quietly enjoying a glass of red, watching your latest Survivor, you have someone that you can call that will take care of everything, including lost funds, legal costs associated with everything about the attack, and potentially some counseling, as well as backup recovery, etc. So they're all the things that you need to do. Those three things, key takeaways, you can implement yourselves. But if I want to use an analogy, you might be a little bit mechanically minded. You might go and buy the parts to build a car in your garage. You might be able to build a prototype that's roadworthy somewhat, but would you take it to the racetrack? Probably not. So my advice is, whilst these steps can make you more secure, you probably want to leave it to the expert to manage and do it properly, because it's like a house. If you have all the defenses in the front, you have a fence, you have a security camera, you have bars on the windows, you have a super secure front door, but you leave the back door open, then all your defenses are for naught. So advice is leave it to the expert, but you can do some of those steps yourselves, if nothing else. Right, that's the end of my presentation. Here are some links for you to view our website, access some of the tools, the health check I talked about. We can do a complimentary consultation to assess your requirements and see if there's a need for you to take advantage of our services. And we're happy to run education webinars or seminars for your teams, should you so wish. Thank you for your time, and we'll now open up the floor for Q&A.
Amazing. Thanks so much. It just goes to show how quickly things happen. And I always said, you know what, this is something that happens to everyone else. And then Friday came along, I was like, oh, damn. It's like insurance. It's a pain in your backside until you need it, and then you're happy that you have it. Anyway, enough of me. What are some of the questions? You can ask any questions on authority positioning, visibility, cut-through communication, and cybersecurity. There was one question in terms of how can we improve our search results on Google, and I put in LinkedIn, simply because LinkedIn is a search engine by itself, plus a trusted source of information for Google. So when you set up your LinkedIn profile properly with the keywords that you want to be associated with, and people are looking for, say, communications expert Brisbane, Mel will pop up just because she's optimized her profile with those keywords. So this is the first and easiest way for you to establish your credibility. And also when we're looking for a person, when we meet somebody for the first time, when we interview them, we are usually checking them out on LinkedIn. It's the easiest way for you to build your profile.
And I think that's a really good point, because it's not only when we look for employees that we do LinkedIn searches and Google searches, but as employers, prospective employees check you out as well. And so if you're not demonstrating your values online, then chances are you're missing out on some really great people who will go to work for somebody who does.
Absolutely. And as I said, I placed about 300 candidates into roles, and always reached out to them on LinkedIn. And if they didn't have a profile photo, I didn't consider them, because, you know, what we can perceive, it might not be reality, but perception is reality, is it would be a fake profile, or it's not active. And I probably missed out on some amazing candidates, but, you know, perception is reality.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Any other questions? Now is your chance. You will get the recording, obviously, with all the links also sent.
I do have a question for Mel, if that's okay. Mel, you said one thing which really resonated to me, because I've got a team of technical people who I liaise with on a regular basis. But how do you, you said something about understanding your people. It's much harder when, sure, I'm talking to them several times a day via phone or Zoom, but when you're not in the same room, side by side, you know, it's a lot harder. What are some of the things we can do to keep that going?
So I've got a mate who works for an organisation, and every Friday afternoon they have Zoom drinks. And for, I don't know, from 3 till 5, the Zoom line is open and it's just social. And they do that one other time during the week as well. I think one morning during the week for a couple of hours. And he just keeps his Zoom link open, and anybody can pop in and say hello. And that's known as, this is the chat time. They don't talk about work. It's the time to just talk about what happened on Survivor last night, or best show ever, in case you're wondering. Total addict. Or, you know, finding out about people's lives on a more personal level, because we used to always do that in the office. We'd have these water cooler chats, or we'd chat in the tea room, or we'd go for coffee with somebody. So think through, how can you do something that's more social like that, but online?
I really like that. I really like the work talk. I think that's yeah, because those water cooler conversations are no longer happening. So no, that's a really good tip. Thank you.
And I think the other thing that I heard, a mate of mine, Damien's just said they use a Slack app where, oh, I like that, which pairs people together for social connections. Yeah, I love that. If you are using a tool like Slack or Yammer or Facebook Workplace, then have some social aspects to it, like have some social channels or some social groups. A friend of mine who installs Facebook Workplace always encourages his clients to have a cat memes group. And various CEOs are like, seriously? She's like, no, seriously, because it's somewhere where people can just talk about cat memes and just have the social, seemingly irrelevant things that you'd talk about if you were in the office. And it's the most popular group on their Facebook Workplace account. So, you know, think through what is it that you can do that's not work related, that brings people together, and that can help instill trust and earn trust. Cooking channel.
I've just seen in the chat, Tara Jacobson is doing a PhD on activities for virtual team building. Well, Tara, I think you've got a very big market that's waiting for you out there. So looking forward to seeing that thesis.
I love that. I love the cooking channel, Damien. I think that's because that also is something that you talk about at work. What are you making for dinner tonight? I need some suggestions. What did you have for dinner last night? What have you got for lunch? What's in the fridge? Photos of fridges. I love that. What are other people doing? We've had a few great suggestions. You're welcome to come off mute.
That, you know, larger organizations that I'm working with doing, they are completely remote, but what they're doing, they're sending, you know, physical cakes to people who have got birthdays, and then have once a month a get together where, you know, people celebrate together. So I think also in terms of the future of events, it's very much the hybrid world, that we've got a virtual aspect, but something tangible. It might be a book. You know, last year I spoke at a conference for the US, and they sent me a book, worksheets, and a little chocolate that we can, you know, celebrate together, which is incredible. So you still feel part of the community, but you're still got, you know, the safety and the comfort from your home.
I love that.
I'd like to put a question out there to those of us who work in larger corporates or larger businesses. Have you experienced any sort of discomfort around the level of trust between, say, management and employees around working from home? You know, around, are they really being productive? Are they really working? How can we see it? Do we measure it? Has anyone had anything like that? And can you share some experiences? We have a shy group, or no one works for a big corporate, or everybody trusts everybody.
It's so funny. I'll just put something in the chat box that I mentioned before. Rachel Botsman, she actually researches trust, and she explains how trust is shifting now with the digital world, that we don't have to have an institution that's between us to regulate, contracts and so forth, but it's now digital platforms. So we make up our mind whether a person is trustworthy based on their recommendations, their ratings, and so forth. And if you haven't seen it yet on LinkedIn, we can set up the services they provide plus the ratings now, so people can actually rate us. So we can say we are the best, but this comes down to the social proof. Do other people also say that we are the best? And this is a big differentiator.
I mean, that's a very good point, Petra. I really like that, because people have had to trust each other. So that's a excellent point there.
I also, the research that comes out of the Edelman Trust Barometer, and I'm just popping a link in there in the chat as well, is really interesting, because it also talks about how the way that we trust is changing, and it's a global survey, and they break it into countries. So one of the things that it shows is that at work, the person that we trust the most is our direct line manager. And so if you've got direct reports who report into you, then according to the Edelman Trust Barometer, then you're the most trusted person in their work world. And so what is it that you can do to foster that trust and make it even stronger? And think through also, how much trust do you have with your manager? Because the number one reason people leave a job is because they don't like or trust or don't want to work with their direct supervisor. So think through that relationship as well, because that can really make or break someone's experience in an organisation. I certainly know it has for me in the past. And it's one reason I quit my job to start working for myself, because I just couldn't cope with my direct supervisor for another moment.
And this is what we see more and more. I put in the chat before, the Great Resignation. People are dropping out of corporate roles left, right, and center without having to have another job to go to, because they realize the time is such the most precious asset in our lives. We are not putting up with another day with the wrong person.
One of my friends sent me a text last year, and she said, "I've just quit my job." And I said, "How come?" And she said, "It wasn't sparking joy. I Marie Kondoed it." All of that.
So good, so good. Now we are right on time. I just put in the chat, drop one takeout that you had, because the best way to learn is to teach. So drop one comment, and if you want to start building your online profile to actually show that you're learning, that you're networking, that you educate yourself further, do it also on LinkedIn. Tag each other, because you can tap into other people's network, which is also part of social proving. It shows that you are dedicating your time to education, to further development, and not just talking about it. Peter Ray started understanding what you are known for and what you want to be known for, and the 4 levels of communication. Love it. Online presence more than ever. Absolutely. So keep them coming. You will get the recording. You will get all the links that we mentioned before. And please make sure to also connect with each other, because this is, also why we're here. We want to build a trusted network with each other. So when we've got questions on anything, we can draw on those who know what they're talking about. Oh, yes. Making sure they have multi-factor authorization. Yes.
Yes. 100%.
All my social media accounts have it, but I don't think my bank does.
Wow. Making me really nervous.
That's amazing.
But you can't do anything on my account without me getting a text. So having said that, I need to up that.
Yeah. There's a way to get around.
I've written it down.
Enough of the stories.
I'm doing it next.
Amazing. Well, we are right on time. So thank you everyone for coming. Great to meet you, for those who we haven't actually met yet. So stay in touch. And with that, have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Petra. Thanks, Mel.